Here, as always, we'll start with the approval of our minutes from our previous meeting on September 23rd. If anyone has seen anything they read through, any changes or amendments or anything like that, let us know, or we would entertain a motion
I'll move to approve the minutes from September 23rd, 2024.
and have, go ahead and call it. Megan, please.
Aye.
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 All right, we do and we don't, but we're going to skip right through the scheduled visitors and guests. We have no unfinished business, so we'll jump right into our new business this evening. First thing up for is the adoption of the resolution of the Onward Ozark Corridor Plan. And Cameron, I'll let you introduce who's here to present that to us.
Yes, we have Taylor Plummer here this evening with Olson. Her and her team has been working on our corridor plan for several months now this year. It was a project we identified to budget in this year. The study is to look at kind of the future developments along three of our major corridors in the city. She will present the findings, the highlights, and the results. And then with the following of this, staff is asking for the commission to consider approving a resolution adopting this plan. So I'll turn over to Taylor at this time.
Okay, thank you. You
Good
go right ahead.
evening. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Taylor Plummer. I am the community planning group leader with Olson. We were hired to lead the community through the development of the corridors plan for three specific corridors in your city. We're gonna get it. There we go. Okay. All right. So like Cameron said, going to go through a high level overview as quickly as I can here because there's a lot of content. And this presentation doesn't even really capture the full depth of the plan. If you've looked through the plan, there's a lot of content there. So I encourage you to actually read through that, look at the graphics. I'm happy to answer questions from there. The project itself, the whole intent was to understand what's going on along the three corridors, which I'll show you what those corridors were here in a second. Understand the existing conditions, the market, the economics at play along the corridors, what is working, what's not working along the corridors, and then also conduct public engagement and stakeholder engagement to understand the desired future vision of the corridors. So the study areas, which the light blue color is a little bit difficult to see on that screen, but the light blue on the right side, that is South Street. That is the South Corridor. I'm glad that those names aligned for our purposes. But South Street, we typically call that the South Corridor, 3rd Street, the Central, and State Highway NN as the North Corridor. So on these maps, unless we're looking at a map of South Street, north is to the left. So keep that in mind, just orientation wise. So topics that we looked at primarily focused on future land use and economic development along the corridors. But land use is so interrelated with transportation. So we did look at some transportation elements, though keep in mind this is not an in-depth transportation study of the three corridors. It was largely focused on land use. And then also related to that is placemaking and aesthetics and the character of private development and public realm improvements. So all of it kind of goes hand in hand, hard to separate, but land use and economic development were the focus. The planning process itself was about a year or so. We started last September 2023, went through November of last year, looking at the existing conditions. Again, we had an economic and market analysis done by a separate subconsultant, Canyon Research Southwest. We did a field trip along the corridors with city staff members and other technical committee members. We did a lot of geospatial analysis, looked at demographic data. All of that being documented in the appendices of the plan. So if you really want to dive into the data, that's where I would recommend that you go. And last thing we did was review existing plans and studies that the city already had in place, just to understand what has been planned here before. We then moved on to the public engagement phase, which engagement really goes throughout the entire project, differing levels as the project progresses, but had our heavy engagement events in that October, November timeframe into December of last year. Then moved on to developing the plan, refining the plan, and writing the implementation plan to the plan. Lots of planning. The next few slides here just give a high-level overview of the economic and market analysis that was done. And again, if you want to dive into the specific details, especially the recommendations for each corridor, go to that appendix, and that full summary is there. There's also an executive summary if you want to keep it brief. But we started at a somewhat macro level, looking at the city as a whole. Obviously, Ozark is growing population-wise. By 2040, you're looking at adding 6,300 to 7,600 residents. That then adds more jobs, projected to add 1,600 to almost 2,000 new jobs through 2040. And those are largely anticipated to be in the retail trade, services, construction, finance, insurance, and real estate. But overall, the community is growing. So that growth obviously has direct impacts on the need for housing and retail and service offerings. So then we'll look at the 5 different market types that were studied during the analysis, first one being retail. The city as a whole overall has a high pull factor. So you're getting a lot of the retail sales at a higher than average rate, higher than the statewide average, which is positive. But one thing to note is that your vacancy rate in the retail market is below market equilibrium. At least was when the data was pulled here in 2022. So that creates a barrier for new businesses coming in. There's limited space, limited options for them to choose from depending on their needs. In the office world, very similar findings here. Office market is also operating below market equilibrium, creating an opportunity for new space or a constraint for new businesses, either expansion of existing businesses you already have or new businesses to come into Ozark. On the industrial side, again, very similar. With the industrial job growth that's projected, the city is forecast to need about 250,000 to 400,000 square feet of new industrial space. And this again is through 2040. Then on the housing side, single family housing is increasingly taking the market share of your housing within the city. Owner occupied housing has continued to increase over the last 20 years or so, and renter occupied housing has declined. And then lastly, in the apartment world, you'll see that spike in the third quarter of 2023. That's when an apartment complex came online, 240 units. So that vacancy rate spiked quite a bit there. So not at market equilibrium, but that will continue to improve. But if you look at those years before 2023, you're at that 2.3, 1.8, 0.9, 1.2. That's all operating below that market equilibrium again. So again, showing the need for more units. So the next few slides are a summary of some of the things we heard through public engagement events throughout the project. And I'll touch on what those events actually were, when they were, who was involved. But quick summary, the North Corridor, again, North State Highway NN, there's a lack of pedestrian and bike infrastructure, which presents safety concerns for anybody using active transportation. It's difficult to access the 3 schools along the corridor if you don't have a car. There's some safety concerns with the significant elevation changes, the lack of lighting, and some traffic congestion that was noted. The northern portion of the corridor is far away from community amenities like parks and other community spaces. And you'll see this on all 3 corridors, but all 3 were noted to lack unique character elements to make them stand out and give it any distinct identity. And then the biggest, well, not the biggest, an important note on North Corridor in particular is the utility constraints. Basically north of West Bluff Drive to Weaver, there isn't any water, sewer, or stormwater infrastructure, which has impeded development, as I'm sure you all are aware of. The Central Corridor, 3rd Street, again, traffic congestion. One point in particular along 3rd Street is the disorganized access points. So there are a lot of different access drives creating conflict points between vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, really any kind of traffic there, just opportunities to have conflict. Similarly, there's a lack of pedestrian infrastructure and crossing points, lack of a connection between the corridor and the downtown area. And you're driving along 3rd Street and you essentially drive by your downtown. So there is an opportunity missed there to connect with the charm and history within downtown Ozark. Again, lacking cohesive aesthetics and character. The Finley River was something that came up quite a bit when talking about this corridor, needing to monitor its water quality, plan for flood hazard mitigation, wildlife preservation, et cetera. And then rolling topography. It's beautiful. It creates some challenges for development. South Corridor, again, South Street. It's a key commercial corridor for the city, though retail and restaurant options are still limited. And there are some large undeveloped swaths of land, which can make it feel somewhat empty and underutilized, depending where you're at on the corridor. Traffic safety issues, again, lack of pedestrian infrastructure, just making it uncomfortable for those walking. And then lastly, again, a lack of specific identity and character. So we heard those findings and a lot more information through a couple different stakeholder events. The first one happened over a 2-day period. We did virtual stakeholder interviews on November 14th and 15th. We met with about 2 to 3 people in each focus group or each interview. So then we met with 6 different groups: economic development, transportation and infrastructure, land use, natural resources, schools, and the downtown. So we met with stakeholders specifically focused on those topics, asked them a series of questions, trying to understand, again, what's working and not working along the corridors. And then our largest engagement event was the Visioning and Planning Workshop, December 11th and 12th of last year. So that's when we met with about 50 people. Were in attendance, both members of our stakeholder group and our technical committee met over that 2-day period. And that's when we had several of our team members here in person generating ideas for future land use, for development and redevelopment opportunities along the corridors. And then, like I said, transportation and connectivity improvements to align with those future land use recommendations. So an intensive couple days, but that's kind of the pinnacle of our engagement for the project. And then on the public outreach side, just want to say a quick thank you to the communications department at the city. They were great to work with. Always were prompt in communicating with me, helping me out, getting the word out there, whether it's updating the project webpage, posting on social media, sending out press releases, all of those ways to get the word out. So like I said, we utilized emailing, had the project webpage. It's still live on the city's website, social media, flyers, also did project text messages. You could sign up if you wanted to receive updates in that way. one of the main ways that we engaged with the public, and this was relatively early on in the project, was through the public survey that was open from October 6th to November 30th. We received 520 responses. We were very pleased with that response rate given Ozark's population. Those survey response results got us to statistical significance based on population. That's a lot of large words right now. We only needed 378 responses to hit that point. So any responses past that just made our margin of error go down, essentially. So very pleased with that. Reduced our margin of error on the survey to 4.25%. So we felt like we could trust the results. And then also had 2 virtual open houses that the public could attend. They weren't live events. They were open for essentially 2 weeks or so at a time. The first one was open much longer because we wanted to capture people not focusing on long-term planning for corridors, maybe on focusing on Christmas and Thanksgiving, things like that. So we hosted those via the project webpage, but the whole point was to ensure transparency on where the plan was and what we are recommending. So that first open house was more draft content. Second open house was more refined, nearing final content. We use an interactive tool called Conveyo. People can place dots on the PDF and provide comments that way. So on the public survey, quick overview of who actually responded to the survey itself. Almost 100% of the people that responded travel along one of the corridors at least once a week. So they're familiar with these areas that we're talking about. A little over half live along one of the corridors. Our respondent age breakdown fell really between 30 and 49, which aligns with the demographic makeup of the city. 30.3% also work along one of the corridors. So again, pretty high familiarity with the study area. To get a general understanding of the geographic location of our respondents, we generally ask them to place where you live in the city, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4, as you can see on the map up there. Not exact, but wanted to make sure we had a general distribution of responses. Zone 3 was the lowest there, but most hovered around 25%. Findings from the public survey. So the next 3 slides touch on each corridor independently, but touches on the same 6 topics across the top of the table there. So the North Corridor, respondents wanted to prioritize parks and recreation uses, single-family residential, and open space were the 3 top land uses in the future. Types of housing to prioritize: standard lot, detached single-family home, so your traditional single-family home. Interestingly, no residential needed, scored at 36.2%, so direct opposite there. And then age-restricted or senior-oriented communities received 25.6%. Level of aesthetic improvement needed came in at some, so middle of the road needs some aesthetic improvement. What's important in general for the corridor? Again, parks and recreation amenities scored very highly, 59.2%. Then connectivity and safety improvements right behind that at 57, and then enhanced active transportation infrastructure improvements at almost 50% as well. We asked people how comfortable they feel driving, walking, and biking along the corridor. People felt very uncomfortable biking and walking, aligns with everything else we'd heard, and very comfortable driving. And then on the transportation side of things, would like to see additional travel lanes, the roadway widened, consistent sidewalks and crosswalks, and dedicated bike facilities. I'll go a little quicker through these other 2. South 3rd Street. People want to see entertainment and nightlife, vertically mixed uses, and parks and recreation. Again, these all go in the top 3 order that we received. Types of housing, no residential needed, or mixed use residential. And then lastly, standard lot detached single family homes. Some aesthetic improvement desired, creating a unique identity and community character along 3rd Street was very important to people. Again, driving, people felt very comfortable, biking and walking, again, very uncomfortable. And key transportation improvements, sidewalks, crosswalks, dedicated bike facilities. You'll see some themes here. And then South Street, community and regional commercial uses, parks and rec, and then neighborhood commercial, so a little bit smaller commercial scale there. Types of housing to prioritize. People said no residential is needed as the most popular answer, followed by standard lot detached single family homes and mixed use residential. Again, some aesthetic improvement is desired along the corridor, as well as connectivity and safety improvements and economic development and destination creation. People felt very comfortable driving, uncomfortable biking and walking. And again, consistent sidewalks and crosswalks were desired at 62%. If you want to go into all the survey results, there's a QR code there. I can also provide the link. And I believe they are linked on the project webpage, but I'll have to double check. But I can get those to you. So the plan itself, finally here. The plan organization, the actual document itself, includes 6 sections. First 2 are largely table setting, the introduction, what the plan is, what its purpose is, why it was necessary. Section 2, we called laying the foundation. That's where we are talking through goals that apply to all of the corridors, and just the overall vision for the plan itself. Then sections 3 through 5 are where most of the meat of the plan lives. That's where we dive into each corridor specifically. So north, central, and south. And then lastly, section 6 is the implementation plan, assigning roles and responsibilities, timeframes for different tasks and action items. And then over on the right there, highlighting that there are also 4 different appendices. The existing conditions analysis, we called the corridors today. The highest and best use analysis is that economic and market analysis, the review of the existing plans and studies that were already in place, and then the full engagement summary from the project. So every single comment we received is documented verbatim in that engagement appendix. So there's a lot of content there. But again, our process is very focused on transparency and want to report it as we hear it. So key themes, we landed on activated, vibrant, connected, and inviting. Those were the things that we kept hearing that applied to all 3 corridors to some level, some more than others, but all to some extent. So that's what we ended up using as kind of our guiding themes as we wrote about future land use and destination creation, economic development, transportation, and aesthetics and character. So these next few goals, they are very high level in nature. So each of these goals has strategies that will work to accomplish the goal. So keep that in mind just as you read these and as you read the plan. So on the land use side of things or the activated side, we want to implement the future land use frameworks that we show, secure annexation of parcels as necessary, enhance housing diversity along the corridors, promote active transportation infrastructure and future developments, and incorporate community amenities like parks and community spaces. In the transportation world, again, connectivity and collaboration in corridor development to make sure that the roadway connections and the active transportation connections make sense and that we are working towards a network that serves all modes of transportation. Working on safety needs, accessibility needs, and then enhancing utility infrastructure, especially on the North Corridor to support proposed land use intensities increasing. Economic development and programming want to foster public and private partnerships, economic diversification and innovation, supporting business growth and entrepreneurship, stimulating economic growth and revitalizing underutilized areas along the corridors, and promoting tourism and cultural heritage. And then form and character, lastly, streetscape and urban design, focusing on that, seeing what improvements are possible, creating active and vibrant public spaces, encouraging mixed-use development where appropriate, promoting the city's history and hometown feel and community, and then fostering visual cohesion as we continue to develop and redevelop the corridors. And then also incorporating a green infrastructure for sustainable design as, again, things are developed and redeveloped. So the next few slides focus only on the North Corridor. So the vision statement for the North Corridor ended up as winding through the scenic Ozark Hills. The North Corridor is a home base for many Ozark residents living, working, and playing alongside neighbors, classmates, and teammates. Family and friends gather in spaces centered around lifelong learning and growth, fostering a strong sense of community, appealing to residents and visitors alike. Education, commerce, entertainment, and recreation coexist, especially near the center of the corridor where denser development exists and draws visitors regionally, excuse me. So those vision statements, they're a little bit longer, but they are supposed to paint a narrative of what the corridor is to become. And then diving even deeper into that, we provided a statement for each of those key themes as they apply to each corridor. So we see the North Corridor being activated by a large master planned enterprise, entertainment, and recreational district, complete with a regional sports complex. We see it connected to the US 65 corridor, especially via the new potential interchange there, kind of along the center point of the corridor, and also connected to the Finley Riverfront amenities and designed for safe multimodal travel. We see the corridor as vibrant with an active population, likes to live, play, go to school along the corridor, and residents and visitors that take advantage of the restaurants and entertainment and recreational uses along the corridor. And then lastly, that the corridor is inviting because of its accessibility to amenities, services, varied residential choices, and employment opportunities. So you'll see several maps in the presentation and in the plan itself. So each of the corridors has this same graphic called the illustrative master plan. So while it does encompass a lot of the spatial recommendations, it would be just too overwhelming to put every single recommendation on the same map. But this is a nice summary graphic of what the plan is related to connectivity and placemaking enhancements along the North Corridor. So you'll see proposed sidewalks, proposed trails, roadway connections, gateways, both primary and secondary, to welcome people to the corridor, to the city. So again, it's a nice graphic to show you an overview, but it does not touch on the future land use, which, like I said, is very important to the plan, one of the main purposes of the plan. So there are several different land use categories provided in the plan. They are all described and illustrated in that section 2 of the plan. So again, I encourage you to go in there and read those definitions of the different land uses. Some are fairly self-explanatory: single family residential, mixed multifamily residential. But a couple I want to call your attention to on this slide in particular are the mixed use categories, and specifically the ones that start with mixed use commercial district and mixed use enterprise district. There are, I think, 5 different mixed use categories in the plan. Mixed use, in my experience, is starting to get slightly watered down when you talk about it. So you do need to start providing some sort of definition and some sort of bounds for what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, you might see one little pocket of residential and the rest is commercial, and you'll hear, oh, it's mixed use. I don't know about that. So I do think something important we really did in this plan is provide a lot of guidance around those mixed use districts and what they're trying to achieve. They are mixed use in the fact that we are showing several different land uses within them, and I'll show you that here in a second. But they each have different themes in themselves. So the intent of this plan, outside of land use, was economic development and destination creation. So that's why we paid so much attention to these different mixed use categories. So the one I'll dive a little bit deeper into on the North Corridor is proposed development area 1, or excuse me, B, not 1. So this graphic provides basically a deep dive into that redevelopment or development area B. So again, mixed use, wanting to define it and provide some clarity on what that vision really is. We see this area as hosting a regional sports park opportunity in that top right corner, and then a mixture of community commercial, taking advantage of the new interchange that potentially is coming online there. Some public and semi-public uses, some multifamily residential, and then some single family residential there just to it would be to the west of the regional sports park. So this is a rendering of just an idea of what the sports park could look like. Again, kind of on that corner of Stonehill and Highway NN where the roadway curves there. So back behind out in the distance, that's where the commercial uses, the multifamily residential, the public and semi-public, that's where that would live. Again, just a graphic to provide some vision. The Central Corridor, I'll read the vision statement for that to you. Again, this is 3rd Street. The Central Corridor celebrates the evolution of Ozark from its origins along the banks of the Finley River to the vibrant community it is today through a blend of new and old, honoring the historic legacy through responsible preservation of built spaces, intentional revitalization of new places, and environmental stewardship, ensuring that Ozark continues to be a place that future generations are proud to call home. So again, we wanted to relate each of the corridors to the different key themes. So the Central Corridor is envisioned to be activated by downtown Ozark. Obviously, the downtown area where we are tonight plays a very key role in 3rd Street, as well as the Finley River. So want to activate the corridor, capitalizing on downtown, Finley River, and a new large central park with a variety of recreational amenities, which I'll hit on here in a second. We see the corridor connected to recreational areas to the north and retail offerings to the south via the corridor itself. Also that it would be a pedestrian friendly, but also serve the vehicular traffic that will of course need to keep moving safely through the corridor. We see it as vibrant with residents and visitors spending the day in the new Central Park, walking along the riverfront, shopping downtown, enjoying the restaurants, the nightlife, the dining and drinking establishments. And then lastly, the corridor would be inviting through celebrating the history, the culture, all things Ozark, especially the gorgeous natural environment, local businesses, restaurants, just a variety of places here, very mixed use in nature. So again, the illustrative master plan, won't go through all the details here, but I do want to focus on the land use and development and redevelopment sites along this corridor. So again, in those future land use categories, you'll see that there are 4 different mixed use : districts along this corridor. First one being the mixed use commercial district. Second being the mixed use Central Park district. Third is the Third Street District, and lastly is the River District. So again, those correlate with the development and redevelopment framework map, so it all kind of aligns and builds on itself. But I do want to focus on a couple. First, this one is, it would be the redevelopment area B, the River District opportunity. We know there's been a lot of concepts, a lot of work done in this general area for quite a while. We're not proposing anything completely different here outside of wanting to activate the space with mixed use development, largely to expand the downtown area and take it across Third Street to make it feel like it's a cohesive space and that we're not driving by downtown. So again, you'll see several renderings in the plan document. Those aren't prescriptive. They are just trying to cast a vision of what could be. And same here on Third Street in particular. We decided to show some graphics showing some typical sections of what Third Street could look like in the future if we were to implement the mixed use nature and the pedestrian improvements especially. So you'll note here, there's this one and then another one I'll jump to here in a second. This first one is north of Oak Street, so closer to the downtown as we know it. So you'll see 10-foot travel lanes, some parallel parking on either side. One side could also be a parklet where you're extending that pedestrian space out essentially into the roadway, but so pedestrians can use that space, especially as an economic development tool, giving people more opportunity to spend time outside, give restaurants the ability to have outdoor dining. Of course, you put safety measures in place, so nobody's just sitting out in the middle of the road enjoying dinner. So we have that in mind. But wide sidewalks that are complemented by a parkway area to separate pedestrians and the vehicular traffic, and an amenity zone on either side, which is pretty much just more space for the retail businesses or restaurants to provide seating, outdoor dining, really just focusing on enlarging the pedestrian space. Similar idea here as we move south of Oak Street, still along Third, but it does obviously change in character as we get a little bit farther south from downtown. But again, very focused on a comfortable pedestrian environment, larger sidewalks, separating that traffic from the roadway, and then also parallel parking, which can act as a buffer for that pedestrian and vehicular traffic as well. Just creates much more comfort for the pedestrian. So that Central Park District I mentioned, this is, as you can see, on the northwest corner or so of South Street and Third Street. So we're moving down to the south of Third Street of the Third Street corridor. This Central Park idea, we will not take credit for it. This is an idea we've been told about. We just wanted to provide a graphic and some commentary, some narrative and illustration on what this could look like. So this takes advantage of a large, relatively open area right now, focused on providing recreational trail access, but also thinking about how we can have this complement some surrounding mixed use and residential uses, how that might work together, how you need to consider access points. And I don't know about you, but I think it would be very nice to live in one of the single family homes that could be abutting this park amenity. All right, last corridor, the South Corridor. The vision statement is the South Corridor is one of the main front doors to Ozark, providing community amenities and retail offerings along a well-designed roadway that considers multiple modes of transportation, inviting visitors into the community and welcoming residents back home. So we envision the corridor to be activated by a variety of retail, including a master plan commercial focused area, which I'll show some illustrations on that one here shortly. We see it connected, obviously, to the US 65 corridor and functioning as a key entrance to downtown with its intersection to South Street. So potential character change there that would align with those typical sections I just showed. Vibrant with residents running errands, shopping and visiting specialty service providers, both by car, but want to emphasize the foot traffic. And then inviting through its presence as a vibrant commercial area that offers a variety of goods and services along a well-designed pedestrian-friendly corridor. Again, the illustrative master plan. One thing I failed to mention so far, the kind of greenish gray areas that are shown. One there at, it would be the intersection of South and Third at the southwest corner. Those are those mixed use sites. So any of those specific mixed use categories I've been talking about, those are called out on these maps. It would just be a colorful rainbow if we also had the land uses shown on this. So again, very largely focused on commercial uses, especially on the western portion of the corridor, and then transitions to smaller scale residential as you move towards city limits. Also, you've got some existing single family residential. But one thing I want to draw your attention to again is specifically Area E, proposed development area. This was the mixed use commercial district that we identified. So again, this is at the intersection of South and Third. This is an example of a mixed use district that would be commercial heavy. Especially along the frontage, or excuse me, especially at the intersection there. We want to make sure that public amenities are incorporated to the space, that there's a nice grid network that's created with the roadways, but then also incorporate some residential along the corridor that's buffered by some street trees, some park space, and those commercial uses. So this is a rendering again of this corner. So this is looking south-ish, showing the commercial uses that could be there on the corner, but then also at the intersection showing some public amenity space and just a focus again on pedestrian connectivity to encourage activation from the street and to encourage pedestrian traffic on South Street to enter into the development. All right, last section is focused on implementation. For implementation, I just want to show you an example of what the matrix looks like. There are several different matrices in the implementation plan. So we're providing an action, the location, which is just referring to which corridor it applies to. Some, especially these in the overarching actions table, are going to apply to most all the corridors. And we've assigned responsible parties for the action items. We've bolded who is the lead for that action and then who the support parties might be. The timing of the action, the investment needed. Now, these aren't specific cost estimates. They're generally city staff time and just an understanding of what it might take to get this done. And then lastly, the action type, if it's a policy change, if it's a new program, whatever that action actually is referring to. So I'm not going to dive into more detail on the implementation table, but of course, let me know if you have any questions. So I think I went over my 30 minutes, but there was a lot of content.
Well, I'll open it up to the public. If I
Okay.
have to, but we'll call you back up with questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, with this being an actionable request and to adopt this as a resolution, I will open it up to the public for anyone that's here that would like to speak towards that. It is now, open to you. No movement. I will immediately close the public portion. I will turn it over to the commission for questions, comments, anything that might be on your mind. I know it's a lot of information and we didn't get a lot of it, but basically I see this as an extension or an additional arm of our comp plan. It doesn't change any current, help me out, statutes. I'm not using the right words, but it doesn't. The only implementation here is actually accepting this as the information towards the comp plan. Cameron, if
That
you
is
want to
correct.
comment.
And Taylor can clarify anything I misspeak about, but it is a guiding document for staff. Staff's very excited about this document, very impressed with the findings and the results of this document and the Olson team. Staff does anticipate doing an update to the comprehensive plan. There's some things identified in this document, such as new uses that were not codified in our codes, that we may revisit our codes to include some uses. But yes, you're correct. This is something that staff would look at as we get development applications, meet with developers, home or property owners of what their futures could look like on the property. Again, this is a visioning document that, hey, let's just have this to start the discussion and then allow us to move forward to these public meetings and process for implementing development.
Right. Thank you. With that, any comments, questions? I know it's a lot. Yes, sir.
Yes, I just had one, looking at the third street for the central corridor, it looks like there's, I really like the picture, looks really nice, but my main concern is that there's houses and businesses on either side. Expanding it that much might be a little bit of a tight squeeze. I'm not sure how much we'd be able to expand the road that way, and that's just my only concern.
You're talking about the typical sections, the roadway sections that we showed.
Like,
Yeah, you'd like
south
north
of Oak
of-
Street.
North of
Yeah.
Oak Street, south of Oak Street. I think
Yeah.
right in there's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those graphics are just based off of right of way measurements taken from Google Earth. So if those were to be implemented, a lot more study would need to go into what those exact right of way allotments truly are. And obviously topography along Third Street is going to play a big role as well.
Mhm. Yes, Adam, go ahead.
I think it was implied, but just explicitly, so the different land use frameworks that you used were based on the responses to are they mildly based on them, like heavily influenced? Like how much of the framework was influenced by the survey responses and how much of it was influenced by the different interactions and meetings?
Ooh, it'd be hard to give you just an exact breakdown of that.
Sure.
But those land use frameworks came from the visioning and planning workshop that we had with the stakeholders.
Right.
So the stakeholders had just heard those public survey results. So essentially they would be taking that into consideration as we worked through those framework maps. And then during the workshop, that's where those ideas for the separate mixed use categories and providing some greater detail on those, that's where that came from as well.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my only question.
Thanks, sir. We'll leave it up to you guys. If everybody good? If we are, we'd like to go ahead and we actually need to approve this as a resolution that would then go to the aldermen for their review. And again, I think the most important word to me is a vision of Ozark. We're not changing our processes. We're not changing our rules. We're not changing our way of doing business, so to speak. We're just trying to get a vision for the future that's probably coming. So open it up to a motion for acceptance or whatever here. So,
Sorry, I had one question for
no, please.
Cameron. I obviously, when you look, especially, I actually had two questions. One was towards the beginning when we pointed out Ozark's growth. I was not here from 2000 to 2010, or those areas. Was a lot of that annexation from the county, or was that construction and development over those 20 years where it jumped a significant amount?
Yeah, wasn't necessarily here either, but it is. There was a period in time when we had just an absorbent amount of growth. And it had to do with annexation, people relocating to the area. Everyone loves the Ozarks and wanting to come to this area. Yeah, and if you look at our city limit map, you will see what we refer to as a shotgun map, where it's just sporadically sprinkled everywhere. We were eagerly trying to reach out and I'm gonna say land grab some areas and grow. And with that, though, it has caused some constraints on our city. Now we're focusing on infilling those voids. So yeah, we grew fast in the early 2000s, and so did Christian County. We were not the only one.
Right.
Most municipalities around here did the same thing.
Right. And so then secondly, off of that is, I know, how often would we, let's say, the comprehensive plan was from 2019.
Mhm.
How often is common to readjust that as needed? Because I know that's something that comes up for us of land use and like how soon would something like this affect the actual comprehensive land use? Or is this kind of on similar footing? Or would this just be almost like an appendix to the current one or?
It's kind of like an appendix in a way, but it does focus on just the corridor areas. Comprehensive plans, generally every 10 years, you update those, sometimes 5. I will say with ours being adopted 2019, right on the beginnings of the pandemic, a lot of things have changed, and that's the trend we've seen even coming back from a recent planning conference in the Quad State area. A lot of people are looking at revisiting their comp plans. We had planned to make a revisit to our future land use map, but after working on this corridor study, now we're kind of thinking of maybe a relook at the entire comp plan for an update and kind of tie the two together more closely. When we adopted the comprehensive plan, we didn't know exactly how it would grow. And so we just had this future land use noted as mixed use.
Right.
Just by chance, after we adopted that comp plan, we adopted a general mixed use ordinance. The two weren't tied together, but luckily we got something in place for general mixed use. But now revisiting that and getting more specific, like Taylor said, about honing into those mixed use districts. That was just a grab catch all for any mixed use,
Right.
just to give some guiding document. But now we can focus on a residential mixed use, a commercial mixed use, or a blend of those two.
Right. And again, this is just for those corridors. There's plenty of other city besides just these corridors.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
gotcha. So that's just kind of was one of the context of how it would fit in together, especially thinking of how we interpret things in the future, of different annexations, because I know not all of this is city currently.
Right.
So,
If the two documents were completed and finished, staff would defer to this for those corridors and the comp plan for the outside of these
Right.
corridor areas.
okay.
And I will make a comment. I was born here in 1964. I'll let you throw it out there. And my sister worked for the very first planning and zoning office here in Ozark in the mid to late 80s. Holy mackerel. What they did then, we're still dealing with today, trying to, I'm not going to say fix, but make better. I mean, I remember seeing her delve out concrete permits. Just how many do you need today? 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See ya. We've come such a long way, and I think this is just another step to make it a better environment. That's just my 2 cents. So I'm done.
Yep.
Okay, just looking for anyone who wants to jump in here.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution of the Onward Ozark Corridor Plan.
Thank you. Second?
No second.
Okay. Let's go ahead and roll call. Megan, when you get there.
Heather,
Aye.
Pete Renfro,
Aye.
David Colbert is absent, Trevor Branch,
Aye.
Caleb Burger,
All right.
Jeff Garrison,
Aye.
Suzanne Daniel,
Aye.
Alan Colbert.
Aye.
Adam Grant.
Aye.
Thank you, Taylor, for your time and effort. Much appreciated. Okay. Letter B. We have a zoning amendment 24-0014. Property location is 909 through 911 North 9th Street. Existing zoning is mobile home and C2 general commercial district. The requested zoning is C2 general commercial district to replace and encompass both properties. Cameron? Uh-oh. Did I mess up? Oh. I got ahead of it, didn't I? We'll go to commercial while you're figuring out.
You can get it to Mike.
It won't let me. It's.
You want to pull up the presentation?
Oh, there it is.
Ready? All right, this is a zoning amendment, ZA 24-0014. Rezone approximately 8.82 acres located at 909, 911 North 9th Street from M Mobile Home District and C2 General Commercial District to a C2 General Commercial District. The property is currently vacant at this time. The surrounding zoning and uses, commercial and general mixed-use zoning to the north, and the property is vacant. Residential use to the east, and the property is mostly vacant. The residential zoning to the south, which is mostly vacant, and then residential zoning to the west, which is complied with the school and institutional districts. The property can be serviced by city water and sewer and is currently on site at this time. Additional development will require a stormwater hydrology report along with a traffic impact study to identify any additional requirements that would be warranted. There is a freshwater pond and riverine on this property and shall be addressed during development. And then additionally, the property shall comply to the Transportation Overlay District. In looking at the guiding factors of the comprehensive plan for a zoning amendment, the item number 1, relatedness of the proposed amendment to the goals and outlines of the city's comprehensive plan. 1, land use goal and development number 1, provide the opportunity for future growth. Objective 1, manage growth in a manner that creates a compact and contiguous development in the city. This parcel is surrounded by city limits on all sides and provides opportunity for infill development that is compact and contiguous. Objective 12, ensure future development is compatible with adjoining streets. North 9th Street or Highway NN is a primary arterial, which is suitable for this classification in commercial development. Little typo there with HH. Economic development goal 1, attract new businesses and visitors to the city. Commercial development of this parcel would provide opportunities for new businesses in Ozark. And then lastly, the future land use map. The future land use map did identify the future land use of commercial, which is appropriate for this application. Item 2, existing uses of the property within the general area of the property in question. The existing uses surrounding this property are vacant land, residential, and the school district. The requested zoning would be in a suitable use due to the proximity of the major corridor and the future development of the commercial and general mixed-use sites that are to the north. Item 3, the zoning classification of the property within the general area of the property in question. The requested zoning is C2 aligns with the existing zoning classification of commercial and mixed use to the north. To the south is the residential property that is mostly undeveloped at this time and is bordered by zoning districts containing non-residential uses. Item 4, the suitability of the property in question to the uses permitted under the existing zoning classification. The current zoning of the property is mobile home and commercial. The mobile home district does not allow for the highest and best use of this property. Additionally, the property has 2 zoning districts on the one tract of land. The other existing zoning district is commercial. The rezoning of this property would bring it into compliance with the city zoning regulations. And lastly, number 5, the trends of development, if any, in the general area of the property in question, including changes, if any, which have taken place in its present zoning classification. Staff has had discussions or permitted various developments and expansions in this area for commercial and general mixed-use projects. The property to the north was recently rezoned to general mixed use, and in prior years, there has been commercial and planned unit development approved zoning districts. Staff has had discussions regarding the potential development of the residential property directly south for considering a commercial use. As the corridor continues to develop, commercial and general mixed use is projected to be the 2 main uses along this area of the corridor. And then the applicant did complete the neighborhood meetings. At the meeting, there was no one that attended that meeting from the neighborhood. The applicant didn't provide any responses. And then based on the staff packet, staff has identified that all requirements have been met for the approval of this rezoning application. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Do we have the applicant or representative of that would like to speak to this application?
Jeff Owens with the Ozark Fire District,
Could you give your home address as well, or work address is fine.
604 or 604 North Third Street.
Thank you.
So myself and Chief McKinney are here to address any questions that you may have for this.
Thank you. And as required, we'll open it up to the public for any comments. I can probably count to 3 and be done, maybe 1, 2, 3. Open and closed. All right, thank you. I'll open it up for any questions, comments from the commission towards this application. Yes, sir, Chad.
I guess I have one question for the fire department. Currently, is your sole plan for the property for a new fire station, or did you have other, conceptual plans for any future development?
Currently, it is for the new Station 1 training center.
Thank you.
Yes, Hadley.
Before you sit down, sorry, sir.
Sorry.
Sorry. So with the training center, with the fire station, would that encompass all the land, or do you think those would be some extra commercial space on the side that you guys may try to sell off at some point?
We have plans to possibly subdivide it,
Okay.
do a minor subdivision on there and maybe sell part of it off.
Okay, all right, I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think we're good. Anyone else? Adam? Trevor? Pete? Suzanne? Caleb's good. He's good twice. And Hadley's good? Okay, looking for a motion.
We'll move to approve zoning amendment 24-0014 based on staff recommendation.
Second,
Seconded.
Suzanne, and then roll call, please, Megan, if you would.
Trevor Brett.
Aye.
Michael Kramer.
Aye.
Stacy Colbert is absent. Tyler Goldberg.
Aye.
Caleb Burger.
Aye.
Van Daniel.
Aye.
Jeff Harrison.
Aye.
Pete Renfro.
Aye.
Thank you. That takes care of the applications, and we got discussion moving to commission comments. Does anybody have anything to say? Yes.
Now, one thing, I just want to congratulate Cameron
Yes.
Smith on his recent promotion.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have you comment in staff, administrative. Anyone else? Okay. Present yourself as a new employment position.
Well, Yes, so as of today is my first day as the Assistant City Administrator. We will be working to fill my current position, and so that posting is out there at this time. So hopefully in a few weeks, we will have that filled. We'll work through a transition, but I will eventually transition my role out of this into a new person, and then I'll attend as needed or facilitate and assist as needed, and then possibly give updates to the board as well.
Thank you, Cameron.
Right.
Appreciate all you've done.
I have another comment if I could.
Oh, please.
I'd like to introduce Ava Taylor. She is our new Assistant City Planner. She started with us 3 weeks ago now, or 3 weeks ago. So you might see her a little more coming to these meetings, attending and assisting staff.
Welcome. Welcome. Yay. Changes are good. Changes are good. Well, that only leaves one thing if no one else has anything. That's one. And they all said. I don't think you had a nay in there anyway. Thank you, everyone.